These probably the coolest shorts I've ever owned. Holla back.
My name is Zach, and it's my show. You know what else? I'm at my home. In my basement, you know it, recorded on the phone, and I think it's just about the time for us to dive right in. Let's go. Welcome to the Zach Show. Wow.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Zach Show. The shorts reference. A friend of mine, near and dear, hates these shorts, and every time I wear them, I just like to bring it up. So if you're curious, like, Zach, what's going on with the shorts? That's where I'm coming from. This podcast has nothing to do with these shorts. Bought them at Walmart a while ago at that. But anyway, thanks for joining the Zach Show, for watching, for listening, whatever kind of platform you're on. I greatly appreciate it. Like I said, I think I say this every week, but I have a really good time making these and putting these together. And I hope they're beneficial to you. They're definitely beneficial to me, which is selfishly why I'm doing it. I enjoy it. So anyway, we are on a series right now called Unlikely God. We're on part 3 of that series. In week 1, we talked about how God uses the unlikely. He uses unlikely people, and we really hit Moses while he was at the burning bush and how Moses didn't think he was good enough to do what God was asking him to do. You know, he came in and he said, who am I to go and do this? Who am I to go to Pharaoh and to tell him to free the Israelites and all that stuff? And last week, week 2, we talked about how God shows up in unlikely situations. And we looked at a woman who was caught in adultery, and just looking at the idea that God will show up in the most unlikely situations and still forgive you and still use you. It was such a great story. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to either of those, go back, listen to them. Obviously, you can listen to this one. It's going to be standalone. This week, we're taking a look at how God does the unlikely. And we're going to dive into some scripture right out the gate. But this is just a great story. So anyway, Unlikely God, part 1, God uses unlikely people. Part 2, God shows up in unlikely situations. And part 3, God does the unlikely. So let's dive in by, like I said, just taking a look at some scripture. So this is a guy that Jesus heals of blindness. You know, he was blind since he was at birth. And just to give you that little heads up, that little, I guess, context of the situation, let's go ahead and dive into it. It's going to be John chapter 9, verses 1 through 13. And this is what it says. I don't know why I feel like I'm out of breath. All I did was walk down my stairs. This is not a great sign in the cardio world. I even have a treadmill over there. I feel like maybe I should start using it. If you're listening on a podcast, it's just me staring at a treadmill, contemplating whether or not I should ever get on it. I've been on a treadmill. Okay, I digress. John chapter 9, verses 1 through 13. Here's what it says. Let's dive in. It says, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. Talking about Jesus here. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so that the works of God may be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told them, wash in the pool. I'm going to butcher this. Wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. How then were your eyes opened? They asked. He replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud, put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man? They asked him. I don't know, he said. The Pharisees investigated the healing. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. So the Pharisees man, they're always up to something. You know what I'm saying? But the Pharisees, they're like super angry, right? And they're calling Jesus a sinner because he did this work on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees they were so blinded by their religious rules and regulations that they were not willing to help someone when they needed help. Even more, they were so angry that this man got healed on the Sabbath that they went into this whole investigation to try and make it sound like Jesus was a liar. Or like, why would he want to heal this kind of dude? You know, so not only are they saying like Jesus is a liar because he healed somebody on the Sabbath, right? So like, how can he be of God if he's not upholding the laws of God or whatever? But then they're going in, they're like, why would he even want to heal this kind of a dude? You know, like he's not worthy of being healed, which you could almost track that back to week 1. God uses the unlikely people. So I think sometimes for us, I think all of us really fall into the trap of being kind of like a Pharisee. You know, we try to limit God based on our own boxes, right? Don't say this, don't do that, don't look this way. If you love Jesus, you vote for this person and not this person. I think when Jesus came, he shook the people up a little bit. You know, he broke some of those rules that the Pharisees made to try and be extra holy. You know, and I'm not saying Jesus was trying to be extra holy. I'm saying the Pharisees were trying to be extra holy, and Jesus came in and kind of shook that world up a little bit. So I think we even do it based on geographical location. Like, you can't do that in church, right? How many times have you heard that statement? You can't say that in church. You can't do that in church. You can't wear that in church. Almost like trying to draw a distinction that there are certain things that are acceptable outside of the church that are not acceptable inside of the church. Like, what does this brick and mortar building have to do with your character? It's never made sense to me, man. If you can't do something in church, I would ask the question, should you be doing that thing? That's what my question would be. But Jesus comes along, especially in this story in particular, and he did what was right. And because of what Jesus did, he took a huge shot at the pride of the Pharisees, right? He healed this guy of blindness. This guy had no clue who Jesus was. He not a religious person at all, but you can see a little further down in the chapter where the Pharisees are questioning him, trying to get the answer out of him that they want to get. So they bring this dude, and this part, like, it kind of cracks me up a little bit. I tend to find humor in a lot of places. So just a little disclaimer. If you ever catch me giggling, it's because I have all these things just rolling around in my brain that make me giggle. So anyway, they bring this dude who was blind back for a second round of questioning. You can find it in chapter 9, verses 25 through 34. This is what it says. It says, he replied, this is the dude who was healed of blindness, right? He says, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Then they asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I've told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they hurled insults at him. The Pharisees hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciples. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. The man answered, now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. This to me is just crazy. And maybe I should have included a little bit more. I kind of skipped over a chunk, but basically the Pharisees, they bring in this blind dude's parents, right? Can you imagine being a grown man and they call your parents in? That's kind of crazy, right? So anyway, they bring the dude's parents and they're like, is this your son? Because we heard your son was blind from birth, but this dude's not blind. And they're like, yeah, that's our kid. I can imagine the dude's like, Dad, is that you? Because you've never seen his dad before. But, you know, then they go in and they're like, ask him all these questions. And every second that this guy who was blind makes a solid point, makes a good point, the Pharisees can't handle it, right? And they just start insulting the guy over and over again. And to me, that's a very telling thing that they're trying so hard to hold on to this pride that this guy who's not a religious man, doesn't even know who Jesus is like, look, I don't know much, but I was blind and now I can see. And God doesn't do that through sinners. So, like, even logically speaking, it makes sense that Jesus is the Son of God. And the Pharisees are like, you're a jerk. Get out of here, you know? So Jesus, he comes in and he does the unlikely thing on an unlikely day, right? Like you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, but Jesus comes in and he's basically like, why would we delay in doing good? Why would we ever delay that? And then he comes and he says, night is coming when no one can work, but I'm the light of the world. I am the light. Like the darkness can't take place because I'm here. You know, and this blind guy, who everyone thought had no business having a relationship with Jesus, now does. And at the same time, he really showed the Pharisees how blind they actually were in a spiritual sense. So here's what I would love from you guys and for you to just think through this, but I don't want you to put God in a box. Sometimes he's going to lead you through some crazy situations, through some stuff that you think you have no business being a part of. And I'm talking about this in a good sense, right? Like, just keep your mind open to what God could do with you. When my wife and I first entered the process of buying a house, and this happened really both times. We've bought a condo and then we sold that condo and we bought a house, but we were putting our condo on the market and working with a finance person. And I remember initially we went into it, we're like, we're going to sell our condo and essentially end up in a different kind of condo in a better place that we wanted to live in and stuff. And I remember telling Catherine, like, I don't want to rule out building a new home, but it would have to be an act of God if we did that. Like, but I don't want to rule it out, but there's really we have no business doing it. And now, I mean, we've been in this home for a couple years now. You know, we found a great builder and in a neighborhood that we really like, and through selling our condo and, you know, you appreciate the real estate market going up, we were able to sell that place and get into another place. Finance is like super duper interesting, but, you know, it was only because of God. You know, sometimes he's going to take you through areas that you don't think you have any business being in, but yet he's leading you there for a reason. He's leading you there for a purpose. You know, I don't have any kind of special way of doing anything like this other than to keep my mind open, you know, and even to acknowledge it verbally. I feel like it helps me a ton when I acknowledge things verbally to God. You know, I think when you do it, you're reminding yourself more than anything. You know, God doesn't need a reminder that he's amazing, but to verbally acknowledge it, I think can help us just as much, you know, to just remember that God is phenomenal and that he's amazing. I remember when I took over the online campus at my church. I say take it over. It didn't exist much before, but I got to come in and do this, and I became the online campus pastor, and I was coming out of being the high school pastor, and I didn't know anything coming into that, you know? And so I definitely had like doubted myself a ton in that time. And I remember like this one story from the Bible that just really like sat with me the whole time I was going into it. Cause honestly, I was flying in blind, and there were just some defeating moments for me. One was I was sitting in a Zoom call with the company that we used to stream our services out through, and it was like 2 hours long. I mean, it was a long meeting and Zoom call, and they're running us through like every single detail. And to meet another guy who understands this world way more than I do, even still. But they like stop at one point and they're like, are you guys getting all this? And the guy next to me is like, yeah, I think I'm understanding it. Zach, are you good? And I remember just sitting there and be like, I have no clue what they're talking about, you know? And for whatever reason, the story that kept popping in my mind all the time was when Jesus is walking on the water, you know, and there's this storm going on, and the disciples are kind of freaking out, and they think they're going to die. I mean, it's a crazy storm, but in the midst of this storm, they see Jesus just walking to them on the water. And Peter was like crazy bold, and he's like, He's like, Lord, if it's you, call me out. Call me out there. And Jesus says, he calls him out, right? He's like, you forgive me. This is the Zach version. He calls him to him, right? And so Peter gets out of the boat. Like, if I'm a disciple and I'm in that boat and this dude's, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Get back in the boat. But like, man, you don't think maybe Peter every once in a while had a few doubts about himself as he's putting one leg over the edge and then the next leg, and then he has to take that leap and actually attempt to stand on the water? You don't think he doubted himself at some point? I mean, we know he doubted himself because he walked on water for a little bit, but once he got distracted and took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the waves, the storms that were coming at him, he started to sink, and then Jesus reached down and saved him and got him back in the boat. But for a second, Peter walked on that water when he was chasing Jesus, when he kept his eyes locked and focused in on Christ and not the things of this world. And so for me, moving into that world, like, man, I felt like I was Peter getting out of the boat. You know, I was getting outside of my comfort zone, but man, I just really believe that God was going to do something through all that. And I think he has. You know, I think I've gotten to relate and chat with people that I don't normally get to do that with, you know, and it's been a great opportunity, but you can't rule it out. Don't rule out God. Don't put him in a box. Trust him. Put your life into his hands. He's going to do unlikely things in unlikely situations in your life. The first step is to trust him. It might also be the hardest step, but you got to do it. You got to do it, man. It's going to be the best thing for you. So that's Unlikely God, week 3. And yeah, I guess just to recap it all, man, put your trust in God's hands because he's going to do some unlikely stuff in your life. He's going to show up in the most unlikely situations. He's going to do the most unlikely things. And if you think you are this unlikely person, then you're in pretty good company. So there's a lot of people, even from a biblical standpoint, who would probably consider themselves to be unlikely people, unlikely for God to use. I think back on Isaiah, and God's basically saying, like, who's going to take this message to the people? And Isaiah says, here am I. That's it. He's like, hey, I'm right here, man. You want to use me? Use me. I mean, Isaiah didn't have some, like, speaking degree or a theology degree or anything like that, man. He just said, I'm going to start doing it. If you want me to do it, I'm going to start doing it. So whatever that looks like for you, man, don't put God in that box. Trust him. Lean into what he's got going on for you. And I think he's going to lead you to some pretty awesome stuff and take you places that you never thought you even deserved to be in. But because of God, you do. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I guess all the things you're supposed to do, right? Like, comment, subscribe, share, dream, aspire. I feel like I need to keep adding words there. There's a giant snowman in my basement. Yeah, that's in a treadmill. Apparently I need to get on because I get out of breath by just sitting in a chair now. It's not good. Anyway, we're right about the 18-minute mark, 19 minutes. So, man, thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, I'm having a great time doing this. Yeah, I need to get some guests on here, man. I just do. Like, if you guys got anything you want to chat about, you got topic ideas, you just need somebody to talk to, you got topic ideas. Did I already say that? Whatever, man. You can email me. It's pastorzackkeiter@gmail.com. That's ZACKEITER@gmail.com. It's also down in the description of this show as well. But thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been the Zach Show. I'll catch you next week. Peace out.
My name is Zach, and this is my show. You know what else? I'm at my home. In my basement, you know it, recorded on the phone, and I think it's just about the time for us to dive right in. Let's go. Welcome to the Zach Show. Wow.